Well, hello again. Now that we've got a big old trench dug, it is time to put something in that trench and then fill it. So, I've already got the weeping tile, which is a 6-inch ADS pipe that is perforated so it will allow water into it. The goal is to try and prevent dirt from getting into it. So, the pipe itself has a fabric sleeve sock around it, but what I'm doing here is taking some road geotextile fabric and laying that down into the ditch on top of the pipes. And then we've got a load of 2-inch drainage crush rock. So when they run it through the crusher, it's actually a pretty cool process. It's fun. It's kind of fun to watch. They've got different screen sizes in different places, so that as the rock pieces fall over the screens, anything smaller than a certain size falls through the screen, and then it vibrates, and anything that is bigger than that size gets vibrated off that screen onto another conveyor to move somewhere else. So you've got a bunch of crushed rock, or a bunch of rock that comes into the crusher and gets smashed, and then anything that is like 3-inch in size, for instance, gets kicked off to one side, and then the stuff that's smaller than 3 inches falls down and onto a conveyor and moved over to another grate, and then that one catches anything that's bigger than 2 inches, lets everything smaller than 2 inches pass through, and so that stuff gets kicked off to the side, and they make a big pile of that, and then they can gather that up as just these mostly squarish 2-inch rocks. So they don't sit very well when you pile them together, and they leave lots of gaps in between them. So when you wrap that in fabric to keep dirt out that allows water to pass through, it creates a really nice channel for that water. I've heard a lot of people refer to it as a rock burrito because you're literally wrapping the rock up in fabric. And that's a fairly apt description, I guess. Then you cover that and fill that back up with the dirt, and then layer of topsoil on top of that, and you got yourself a nice little drain in the ground. That way it'll help take that water from one place to another. And this will hopefully keep the soil above the drain and in the area around that from actually soaking up so much water that it becomes soppy and soggy, which is a pretty big challenge. Now ideally, I would love to be able to just pull up alongside of this and dump straight from the bucket, but at least to get started, we don't have that luxury, so we've got to just kind of do at least a little bit of manual labor. But hey, occasional manual labor is good for you. So now that we've got a section, we'll go back and get some more rock. It worked reasonably well to take the backhoe. Oh, well, actually, I guess I'm gonna wrap it for this particular section and then use the backhoe to backfill and smooth that out. But it, as I was saying, it worked reasonably well to take the bucket of the tractor and put it at the back of the dump trailer, and then open the gates and tilt the trailer so that just enough that it allows gravity to gently pull on that load, That saved us a fair amount, but we did still have to kind of sometimes push the rock down the trailer bed. But that's okay. I mean, yeah. See, there you go. Just lifting just enough to let the rock slide, but not enough to pile it on top. Otherwise, that would have been a big old mess to clean up. This area has actually come along quite well. We haven't had a severe enough rainstorm to really test this, so we're looking forward to that, to seeing if, hopefully all of this effort is worth what it's intended to do. It definitely can't hurt. The question is just if it's, I guess, in the right places. So the soil here is a fairly high clay content, which is where the challenge comes in. We actually have a load of they called it 2-inch open. Now and this is from a different rock pit. So the one here, pretty much here in town, is a crushing pit. So they dig the rock out of the hill. I imagine if they need to, they probably use explosives to begin the crushing process and breaking it into small pieces. But then they use a crusher to actually make the smaller rock. The advantage that the crushed rock has is that when you include the fines and the smaller pieces after you compact it, it creates a pretty smooth surface and a pretty hard surface. So it works really well for foundations, for roads. You can use this for the drainage, type situations. The other pit that we have nearby is about, I don't know, 35 miles away, I think. But they actually are on a river, and so they're gathering river rock. So instead of a crusher sorter, they just have a sorter, and they dig these big giant scoops of stuff out of the riverbed, and that sorter does the same thing. It just doesn't crush. So their first screen that they use, they call 2-inch open, because it's allowing anything smaller than 2 inches to pass through, and then anything that's bigger than 2 inches gets kicked out to the side, and that makes a big pile of up to 6-ish inches in diameter. But since they're from the river, they're all smooth rock. Think cobblestone type roadways, that type of rock. And then they filter that further and further and end up with a couple of different sizes of river rock. And then they end up with what they call as septic fill. It's basically the sand that is lots of irregular shapes and sizes, so it doesn't really compact very well, and it allows water to pass through it pretty well. So they use that. They sell that to be used in septic tanks and things. But see, this is what I was talking about. It's much easier to just be able to dump a full tractor load in there, and then just kind of smooth it out a little bit. And we're not checking grade on any of this at this point, because we did a really careful job making sure that as I was digging the ditch out, I was following that 1-inch Wow, that was a really empty load. It's being over there by myself. It's hard to see what's falling into the actual bucket, so that's why I guess Emily came over to help with that. Um, make sure we get as full a bucket as possible. But yeah, so since we were working on that 1 inch every 3 to 4 feet, we know that we already have a nice kind of steep slope for this, and we've got that 6 inch ADS drain pipe, and then the rock. So we're just putting 5 or 6 inches of rock across the whole thing, and then filling that in, and then we get the dirt on top. So the nice part is that it actually helped. Like I said in the last video, it really helped kind of level the area out a little bit more, which will come in really handy when we bring in the compost. We'll mix compost with topsoil and add about 6 or so inches of material on top of all of this. But that's what I'm working on with the backhoe at the moment, is just kind of spreading and compacting it down a little bit. Since I know I'm going to have more fill, then we'll just fill that ditch. I'm working on doing my best to try and spread and level everything out so it's all nice and smoothly sloped, and still following this general slope throughout this whole area. And since I was able to do a bunch of bucket loads instead of one individual bucket load, now I can just kind of work my way across this whole section. And this is aside from the hydraulic thumb, the second frustration that I have with this backhoe is that its side to side movement, for whatever reason, is super weak. It's actually kind of hard to do the side to side leveling like this with it. It's just not. It doesn't have the power. I don't know if the angle of the hydraulic rams needs to be wider, or I don't know, but anyway, so what I'm doing now is I got the tape measure out to make sure that I was getting the fire pit centered in the right spot. It's got to be 20 feet away from any of the trees and shrubs and 20 feet away from any of the buildings. And so I made sure that I knew where that center point was, and then I put this burn barrel there just to make sure that was on the right spot. And then I got a couple of piles of rocks, and so I'm starting with the bigger pile that was kind of hidden there in the shrubs and getting a general position for these biggest rocks. And then there's a couple log sections that are going to be used for benches. But I figure if I can get these picked up and moved, generally roughly into position, then it saves my back quite a bit of work in a few minutes when I start working on actually assembling that fire pit. I ended up technically building it bigger than it should be. When there's a burn restriction in our area, which there currently is, you're restricted to having a 3-foot diameter burn pit for campfires or recreational fires. I ended up taking the burn barrel and using a stick that was 18 inches, figuring on 18 inches is half of 18 inches is, sorry, half of 36 inches is 18 inches. So I cut it down to 18 inches and then used that to measure from the barrel out, and that's where I put the edge of the rocks. And I totally didn't think about the fact that the barrel's like 14 inches in diameter, so technically my pit is too big. But I plan on actually lining it with some sand and refractory cement and fire brick, so that it'll create the fire brick will actually protect the rock, because as the rock gets hot it'll crack and split. So here's just a couple of pictures of the finished progress. And I was using those pipes the idea was originally to create a channel for air to flow in, but I ended up not needing it. They didn't end up making a difference at all. And this is a picture of one of the biggest disappointments of the tractor itself. It has this cubby in the back of the bench for all of the photos, or for all the manuals for the different implements and whatnot. And it turned out that that was a completely horrible spot to put them, because it's not sealed at all. It's not watertight at all. So all of my manuals were destroyed because the rain just soaked in there every time it rained. But anyway, that's where we got to for today. As always, thank you for your time and for watching. God bless you and yours, and I hope you're able to stay safe and healthy out there.